So I was speaking today with one of my comrades in tragedy about patterns of behavior, kind of more in line with, I suppose, patterns of behavior that are determined by trauma. So trauma responses, right, that are embedded in the psychology, but more pertinently, perhaps, the nervous system, and become activated by life circumstances and yeah, the same script plays out, right, again and again. And I was thinking about how much such patterns of behavior and trauma responses and so on, how kind of just overall inextricably tethered they are to, perhaps, to one's personality, that what one takes to be themselves, their personality, is largely, if perhaps not entirely, constituted of such, that it is but an amalgamation of such. Of course, it's we could package those things up with other things, right, that are all kind of still equally ephemeral, though insubstantial. Memory, right? So much of what we take ourselves to be is a kind of a narrative that we play out in our minds, right? We have to kind of remind ourselves of who we are. I'm sure we're all familiar with the experience of waking from a particular deep sleep, and there can be that kind of, this is particularly, at least I've experienced this anyways, this effect is more so pronounced wherein one is, if one is in a new environment, say one is going to stay in some novel place than where they're usually accustomed to sleeping, so a hotel, a friend's house. If one is in a different country, say even this is even more pronounced, right? And one awakens in this new place, right, from a deep sleep, and there's this kind of uncanny period that very much lingers, wherein one is very disorientated and confused about where one is, how one got there, and maybe to some small degree who one actually is. I know I've had that experience when I've been kind of ill and have had a fever or something. Or I've been very confused about where I am and who I am and what any of this is. Very distressing situation to be in. But yeah, the point is that in these circumstances, right, one is kind of begins to embark upon this process of endeavoring to recollect, right, to again spin this yarn, which is constituted entirely of memory, right? Without the memory, one is simply this kind of field of awareness, this blank presence. And sure, trauma is, to go back to that, is partially rooted in the psychology, but also partially, if not largely, perhaps rooted in the nervous system itself. So maybe in some sense you could say that the trauma, right, is a deeper part of what one takes themselves to be than these other fragmentary parts, right, that are composed of memory. They could be more easily misplaced and done away with through amnesia, however it may arise, whereas the trauma that's lodged in the nervous system itself is more concrete. If you listen to some of these, if you've been following the stuff I've been talking about for a while, then you'll know that this is kind of a preoccupation of mine. These kind of, I guess, Buddhist ideas. It's kind of a meme in my own mind that I kind of throw around the term Buddhism in these recordings the same way that Jordan Peterson throws around Pinocchio or Jung in his lectures, at least historically, right? I don't know if he does that so much anymore. Because, it's just in terms of my own experience, right? I see it very much that it's I have this sense, a sense, I suppose, that there lies at the root of a great deal of what is taken to be suffering and discontent is simply something that's a product of perceiving things in an incorrect way through conditioning, largely, that's enforced by society. I'm going to read some lines from the U.G. Krishnamurti reader, and this is from the chapter called Throwing Away the Crutches, and this specific segment is called The Natural State. Okay. This is a state of not knowing. You really don't know what you are looking at. I may look at the clock on the wall for half an hour. Still, I do not read the time. I don't know that it is a clock. All there is inside is wonderment. What is this that I am looking at? Not that the question actually phrases itself like that in words. The whole of my being is like a single big question mark. It is a state of wonder, of wondering, because I just do not know what I am looking at. The knowledge about it, all that I have learned, is held in the background unless there is a demand. It is in the detached state. If you ask the time, I will say, is it 3:15 or whatever? It comes quickly, like an arrow. Then I am back in the state of not knowing, of wonder. You can never understand the tremendous peace that is always there within you, that is your natural state. You're trying to create a peaceful state of mind is in fact creating disturbance within you. You can only talk of peace, create a state of mind, and say to yourself that you are very peaceful. But that is not peace. That is violence. So there is no use in practicing peace. There is no reason to practice silence. Real silence is explosive. It is not the dead state of mind that spiritual seekers think. Oh, I am at peace with myself. There is silence, a tremendous silence. I experience silence. That doesn't mean anything at all. This is volcanic in its nature. It is bubbling all the time. The energy, the life, that is its quality. You may ask how I know. I don't know. Life is aware of itself, if you can put it that way. It is conscious of itself. As I understand it, within Zen, the same way as within Buddhism itself, of which Zen is, of course, a sort of sub-school, sub-tradition. Within Zen, there are also different schools. One of them, which I think is Soto Zen, the teachers themselves never speak about so-called enlightened or awakening experiences that they may have had, wholly irrespective of the fact they are like considered to be have received the Dharma transmission, right, from another person who had received Dharma transmission, and so on and so forth, all the way supposedly back to Gautama, Siddhartha Buddha himself. But they never speak of these experiences as those experiences are themselves I suppose in many ways beside the point. The experience itself is of seems to be, I'm not making any claims here, but seems to be one of this realizing, but not just intellectually, but viscerally, right, with the whole of one's being on this deep level of comprehension that just surpasses language, that one does not know. It's this deep confrontation with such of this fundamental ignorance. And it's a falling away of the veils between those veils that have been there all along, obstructing this fact, this basic fundamental realization that's been staring one in the face the entire time. The fact of one's own being in the midst of this total mystery, again, to use that, what I call the gross spiritual term. But I guess that's what it is, right? A mystery. And so, in place of speaking about this, because it can't itself be spoken of, that of which we cannot speak, we must pass over in silence, right? The Wittgenstein quote. Emphasis is instead placed upon the practice of Zazen itself, which they consider to be quote-unquote good for nothing. Zazen is good for nothing. It's a goalless practice. The practice itself is the point. To sit Zazen is to, I guess, be in a state of enlightenment, for there is no place to go, there is nothing to be realized. And this is, it's simultaneously merely rhetoric and also actually pointing to the truth, but as with so many of these spiritual teachings, they're very sort of deceptively this elegant simplicity of them, right, that it can be incredibly deceptive, taken at face value, right, without already having obtained or tasted something of this gnosis, of this state. One will take them to be the teaching something wholly other than what they are. As if one hasn't had a glimmer of that state, right? To say that Zazen is good for nothing is just you take it as it is, right, at face value. But if you can see what nothing is pointing to, that the word is itself not the thing, and that the thing that it's pointing to, nothing, can itself be something, and that something can itself be the totality of all perceivable reality, right? But again, those are just words, and they steer us away.